Hey friends, welcome to this episode of Embracing Your Season. I'm your host, Paige Clingenpeel. Thank you so much for joining us today. Friends, I'm so excited about this episode because as a therapist, I believe in the value of taking care of our bodies. So not only do I ask my clients about their stress levels and their thought life, but I'm asking them about their sleep and their diet and their nutrition, as well as how their body is feeling. It is all connected. That's the cool thing about God's creation, is that everything is connected. For instance, did you know, friends, that you make majority of your feel-good chemicals in your gut? That means that if you are stressed out or you're not eating a healthy diet, you're not going to be able to make feel-good chemicals, which then correlates with your mental health. So for me personally, I went through this whole season, pretty much a decade ago, where things were just mismatched. So my gut health, my mental health, the way that my body felt, it was a hot mess, let's be honest. I mean, I think I was on number 3 for having children at that point. I was overwhelmed with 3 kids under the age of 5. I was probably pregnant with my next one at that point. Like, it was just a season of stress for me. But what I found is a internist or a doctor that was able to talk to me about all the things that I was putting in my body and all the things that I was exposing my body and mental health to. So I realized that in order to practice self-care, not only do I need to have an accountability partner for my spiritual life, a counselor, or a very wise mentor for my mental health, but every month I am very intentional about seeing a chiropractor or now someone that specializes in rolfing. So my conversation today is with Jason Snell, and he is an advanced certified rolfer. That's right, friends, rolfer. I had learned about this practice when I was at church. I was talking to a friend about some of the stuff that I had gone through with my own back neck injuries. And she's like, you got to totally check this out. And so I did. And every time that I meet with Jason, he just fills me with more wisdom, more knowledge about how our bodies are interconnected and how important it is that we're taking care of ourselves. Because mamas and parents out there, how often do we neglect ourselves over taking care of our bodies and then not have much to give out? So please join me now as I have an amazing conversation with Jason Snell on this episode of Embracing Your Season. Well, Jason, I'm so excited to have this conversation with you. I know that you and I have had these conversations behind the scenes, which is why I wanted to introduce you to my listeners, because the knowledge and wisdom and just life story that you have is just so incredible. So thanks so much for joining me today.
And thank you. I really appreciate you asking me to be on this platform with you, and it's an honor. Thank you.
So let's start with your story. You have a very personal experience with this health journey that led you to what you're even doing today. Can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, I don't know how far to really start with this, but at one point in time, I really started, back in probably 2012, 2014, even, somewhere in there. I was training a lot, and I wanted to, take it to the next level and kind of start to understand what it means to be healthy. Like, because I really didn't have that background or an upbringing of what is healthy, right? Like, I didn't know what nutrition really meant. And like, food was just something I consumed, and it really wasn't brought to my attention that it was something that nurtures the body, right? Like, it's something that actually we thrive off of is our food, our substance that we take in on a daily basis. And so, it started right around then when I was doing a lot of training for martial arts and so on. And I needed to learn how to, watch what I was taking in and like, how do I manage weight and things like that. And then, some years went on and um, I had a pretty intense awakening with my injury, an injury I had, and I didn't know how bad it really was or what it really meant to like have this type of injury. So it was very like abrupt to me of like, whoa, what is going on with my body? What is happening? So to give some reference to that, I had a pretty traumatic head injury from wakeboarding, and then shortly after I had multiple other neck injuries from the training that I was doing. And I didn't realize how intense this or how severe this neck injury was until later on. And I started piecing it together and going, oh, that's when I started noticing migraines. Oh, that's when I started noticing digestion issues. And I was like, oh, that's when I started noticing anxiety for the first time. I was like, oh yeah, it was all after this wakeboarding accident. And I had a side whiplash where my air touched my shoulder, and I had a concussion, whiplash, and I was like, that's when everything started to be a little bit different in my life. Yeah, and then so with that being said, I started diving more into what is going on. It's not, it's not what the doctors were saying was um, labeling me like sorry. They were trying to label me as like manic and oh, he's just bipolar now. I was like,
Oh, wow.
what yeah, I might have been a little cuckoo from time to time, right? But none of that stuff felt right, and it was a rough journey. Um, Specifically due to the fact my daughter was just born a month before all of this happened. So it's been a little while since I've like recapped this, and so it's a little emotional right now. It's a little raw. I think a little bit was the anxiety was kicking in today, kind of leading up to this encounter with you today. So I was like, oh wow, I'm actually feeling some anxiety and this and that. So it's a little higher than normal today, and for some reason, I'm having some minor neck irritation, and leading into today, I was like, oh man, I really hope my neck's in a good place today because of that. So so I could have my wits about me today, and anytime my neck's in a not so ideal place, it's easier for me to have just slight anxiety is actually like a lot of anxiety. Like the typical, oh, I'm getting pulled over anxiety would be like, oh my gosh, I'm getting pulled over, kind of thing. Or, things like that, where you typically wouldn't have like an intense sensation. A lot of times now, because of this injury that I had, a lot of things that are slight minor would be actually a lot to my nervous system.
It's so incredible to me, and I know this is
Yeah.
things that we've talked about too, is the correlation between a physical injury and how it manifests in mental health issues. Can you explain some of that and how that has a connection?
One more time. Can you repeat that?
Yeah, so it's incredible the connection between physical injury and how it shows up in mental health. You're saying there's a connection between your neck and then even displaying like manic behaviors. Are you aware of what that connection is?
So, yes. So the connection that from my own personal experience, and I'm not a doctor, right? And I'm not trying to pretend that I know all of uh, everything and every symptom that might come from people that act a certain way. Although I know from my own personal experience that due to the neck injury, due to the cervical instability within my neck, the vagus nerve is consistently being pushed on or hindered in this way to send the proper signal to the visceral compartment, to the rest of my body, saying rest and digest, right? Or it actually signals a little bit more fight and flight, the sympathetic versus the parasympathetic. And that's the autonomic nervous system. is the parasympathetic and sympathetic. Sympathetic would be fight and flight. I'm in trouble, I'm in danger. And then there's parasympathetic is calm, rest, digest. And so therefore, if I eat certain foods, even that might set things off of like, oh, hey, your digestion isn't in rest and digest today. And the coffee with the stimulant in it is actually going to raise the sympathetic level within my body and put me in more fight and flight, or certain spicy foods, things like that. So there's a lot of things that I really have to watch consuming on a regular basis due to that.
And so this is the part that is just so fascinating to me, is because you've researched this, you've practiced this in your own life. I know that for me, the vagus nerve, for instance, is something that I'm learning more about as a counselor, because we tend to hold some trauma there and be able to work through that and the connection that it makes from our brain to the rest of our body, as well as the emotions. But most people just don't know this stuff. And so when they go to the doctor is going to refer them to medical treatment, and not necessarily the holistic view that it might be something else. For instance, let me share the story of when I came to you. I came back from the DR trip. We went to the Dominican Republic for a missions trip, and it was so fun. It was great. We were riding in trucks, in the back of trucks, up mountains, down mountains, over rivers. I mean, like everywhere, right? And so we were bouncing a lot. And when I got back, I remember going to the doctor because I was just dizzy all the time. It wasn't like a vertigo level, but it was just this constant dizziness. So I went to the doctor, and they were explaining, well, we're going to have to get an MRI, and maybe it's your blood pressure, maybe it's your blood sugar. And so they're doing all these things. And I just had happened, because I try to set an appointment with you once a month, to have my appointment a couple days later with you. And I remember telling you this, and you were like, okay, let me check something out. And you just, the way that you positioned my neck, and you were like, oh no, this is definitely off. I can feel it. And literally the next day, I remember texting you, be like, I'm not dizzy anymore. And this was it. And it was all because I allowed an opportunity for someone else to speak into this. So speak to that a little bit about how, I mean, I don't even know how to ask that question of just like, there's so many more options out there than the medical profession.
Yes.
Thoughts on that?
Yeah. So I think when a lot of people end up having something not feeling right, or not feeling as ideal as they would like it to be, they start to go, I'm getting a lot of chest pains, or I'm getting a lot of indigestion. I'm getting a lot of headaches and migraines. The typical norm is, unfortunately in our society, is to go to the doctor, go to the doctor, go to the doctor. And which that is understandable. I'm not telling people not to go to the doctor too, right?
Right.
Like,
Yeah, of course.
because you never know what's going on, and maybe it's definitely warranted. Although I think that if you step back a little bit and you think about your day or your week and go, oh yeah, I hit my head. I fell and I was playing around with the kids and I kind of tweaked, or I was sleeping on the pillow and man, my neck just has this kink in it, right? Or if you think about, like, because you thought about it in our conversation, and you actually explained, I was bouncing around on this thing and I was like, I wonder what's going on up in the neck. I wonder if there's a little bit of tension, occipital tension, the base of your skull, if you don't know what that is. Or, is there a slight rotation because of all this bumping that is being created due to the muscles that are in the head? They're so small, so intricate on the way they connect your skull to your vertebrae. And if they get locked down just a little bit on one side, that puts just enough tension and twist or rotation within the cervical spine that you might get a little bit of symptoms of like vertigo, migraines, headaches, or even, if there's enough twist and it's actually impinging in encroaching on, is that the right word? On the actual vagus nerve, that you could have even way more symptoms than what you were describing, right? So I think it's important to kind of think about your story of that week, that day, of well, did I do something, get shoved or knocked, or something that happened within, that could be triggered due to cervical tension?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I don't know if I fully answered your question there, but
Yeah. No, it makes complete sense, right? Like you are suggesting the listeners just think back to what has the last couple weeks been like. I mean, and your story actually was like it was kind of a couple years, weren't you thinking like
yes.
how
Yeah.
all of this compared? But maybe it's more of doctors and practitioners just spend time asking about your history, and that maybe
Yeah.
can prompt you to say, oh yeah, I did have a car accident this time, many years ago, or whatever the incident was. But I think the reality here is what you're saying is that our bodies are all connected, and when we have an incident circumstance or even a traumatic incident, it will connect in a way that our body's going to respond. We just need people like you that can help pinpoint and give us words and information about how to heal. Now, I know that some people are a little nervous going to like chiropractors, and because they're fearful that if they go once that they're going to have to continue to go. So, what are some of your suggestions of finding the right professional to, help with neck injuries, for instance?
Yes. So I'm going to get some flack maybe from, some friends that are chiropractors, but I do want everybody to know that not all practitioners are treated equal, right? So there's good, there's bad, there's okay. And you kind of don't know until you have the experience with them, right? Like going, oh, I feel really good every time I go. It lasts for weeks or so on, right? That's like on the low end of the spectrum person that's going, or I should say, like, they don't need a lot of treatment. They don't need to go in a ton. Maybe they just slept wrong and they need a little bit of an adjustment to get them back into place. And the only person they know is a chiropractor. Great, go. And then there's people, maybe they didn't have, I should say also that they didn't have a traumatic injury. Because once you go to somebody that is like the typical chiropractor, snap, crack, pop, I should say the high velocity adjustment, right? To calm that down a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Um, if you've had an injury, actually, it's like you might want to watch going to that chiropractor. You just might want to watch it. Not saying that you can't, not saying that you're going to end up with a horrible cervical injury after you go. Although, if you've had a traumatic injury, you might want to watch or think about going to the typical chiropractor. You might want to try to see a specialist that is specializing in the upper cervical neck. And this is specifically for the neck. Most other joints can handle this, except for like the neck. The neck is so unique, and it's not ultra fragile. Although, if you've had a traumatic injury of whiplash and so on, the last thing that in my mind is that we don't want to give it another traumatic force in the treatment.
Yeah.
You want to give it more of a gentler touch to try to coax it back into place, trying to help it find its home. And when I and there's so many different modalities out there that can do that too. There's so many modalities. Rolfing is one of them. There are chiropractors that can do this stuff. There's PTs that can help, that do soft tissue work. There's there's a plethora of different modalities that can help. Although it's finding the right one, and it's going and doing it and going in to have that experience. If you go and you feel worse within half an hour after, or the next day it's even compounded, it's like, oh my gosh, I went and I feel worse. Well, that's a sign, that's a signal to your body, to your mind, of saying that wasn't for me. And sometimes, unfortunately, there is that thing that says that saying of sometimes it gets worse before it gets better. I don't necessarily like that.
Mm-hmm.
Although I have seen people leave my office and come back and say, oh my gosh, I had such a horrible headache for the next day. But they came in feeling like like no other, right? Like just down in the dumps. And then they leave and they said, I had the worst headache ever the next day. But then when it let up, I haven't felt that good in that long. So I think that's a very good kind of reference too. Sometimes it gets worse before it gets better. Although if it gets worse before it gets better and it's always like that and always like that and it never actually gets better, well, guess what? It's probably not going to get better doing that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I've also heard that when you have an adjustment as such, that it releases toxins. I've never really understood that. Can you explain any of that?
I'm not sure. So this is part of the vagus nerve to me, releasing toxins. So if you get an adjustment and you're releasing toxins, things are working again that weren't working. So if you think of your body as sacs, the visceral compartment, the heart, the gallbladder, the stomach, all these things are just sacs that are holding hormones, fluids, and whenever these sacs within the visceral compartment are not getting the proper signal due to it being in, the nerves that are signaling release, contract, the whole process of the body of going in and out of homeostasis, right? Whenever it's not in its ideal place, it's not going to pump properly. So you get it functioning properly. And then the toxins will start to release from the organs better because they're actually operating at the level they're supposed to.
That's so
and
fascinating.
that's my theory. That's my theory of
Yeah.
what's going on within the body, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it kind of makes sense when you hear it, right? Like it's like, oh yeah.
Yeah. Well, it reminds me of the time, I think it was maybe one of our first 2 sessions, and you make your clients stand straight so you could see where they're kind of lopsided a little bit. And I remember you took my head and you had manipulated just slightly, and you said, this is what it's supposed to feel like when it's straight. And it felt for me like I was lopsided. It's just like how we get so accustomed to our bodies not working to the level that they are designed to work. And so having someone like you that is able to do that, that's just so powerful. So you mentioned the word rolfing. Can you please explain that? Because I had never heard it prior to coming to you, in fact.
Yeah. So rolfing is a unique type of body work that we're trying to work within the field of gravity. We're living in the field of gravity, and sometimes we get pulled out of place. We get a lot of times it's emotions or a injury or a pattern of work that we're doing, right? Like the guy working at SDI or a steel mill doing one motion over and over, a painter that's always painting doing this thing. There's so many different things that can pull us out of alignment. And when that happens, we're not functioning very well. We're not functioning optimally. And so therefore, Ida Rolf came up with this system that helps realign us within the field of gravity. This lady is brilliant. I've tried reading her books and going, wow, like I have so many freaking questions because it's her language is very it's not for the layman, like a normal person that doesn't, I guess, dive into movement and so on. Like they're going to be like, what does that mean? So she was a biochemist. She actually got her doctorates in biochemistry, and she really is just a brilliant person. I've listened to her lectures, and she's just so smart. And so she came up with a system of how do we realign the body. And the system is basically one long 10-hour session broken up into 10 sessions, right? It's like it was way too long for anybody to lay on the table and integrate the work. If they're on the table all day for 10 hours. So she broke it up into 10 sessions. And, back when I first started, a session would be like an hour and a half. And now I've got it down to like an hour 15 after getting my advanced certification and having almost a decade of doing this, being in this field. So I kind of gotten better over time, and yeah, it's amazing work. The work itself, to reference what it actually looks like, is a client comes in, they give me, their background of like, hey, I had this, and this happened to me, or this is how I feel. I just, want to do this for maintenance. I get a plethora of different things that people come in here for. And I take that all in. I'm basically wrapping the session around the conversation. Like that's how I do my sessions. Like what is it that they're coming in with? What is their mindset like? What are they looking to get from this? And I go, okay, how do I best fit this person's needs and wrap the work around that? And then, I watch them walk. I do kind of like this analysis of what does their gait look like? Where are things looking like they're not moving as well as the rest of the body? Meaning basically trapped energy not flowing. And I'm not saying that as a esoteric or this like as in like energy work. Like it's literally stuck energy not traveling through the body, because the body is designed to have undulation and movement all the way from the foot up through the spine as we walk. And a lot of times I don't see that, and we go, okay, where can we piece together some work to travel from head to toe, or from the foot all the way up to the head, and go, where can we unlock that with some fascial work, with soft tissue work. And the work is all done typically on the table. I have a bench. I do a little bit of bench work. And I use my fingers, knuckles, elbows, forearms. Haven't used a foot yet, but I've heard people doing that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be interesting to experience, I'm sure. Although most people, we close our eyes, don't we? So we wouldn't even know.
Yeah. If sometimes I have clients that come in here and they fall asleep on the table. I do a little bit of neck work for 15 minutes. And I think this is like their nap time away from work. And then other clients are like, I can't believe you have people sleep through this.
Exactly right. Yeah. Different for each person. So what encouragement can you give the listeners out there of when to seek treatment or when to listen to their bodies?
Yeah, so it's a really good question. And I really think that if you have a good mind-body connection, like you already probably know, although if you're maybe lacking that, there's some daily things that you might need to check into. And that's driving home, laying in bed. So if you're driving home and you're just like, oh, my back, and you're constantly moving around, you just can't stay still. If it's not the ADD that's causing it, then, maybe it's an ache and pain. If you have that constant ache and pain, it might be time. If you lay down in bed and every time you go down to lay in bed, you're like, it always feels worse when I'm laying still. And that's because the brain and body can finally calm down, or the mind can finally be internal versus external. And that basically means they start to listen to their body and go, oh, there's something going on. It always hurts when I lay down and I lay still. That's because they're finally becoming very internal at that moment, and there's not a lot of external going on. So if you have that every single night you lay down, check in, see a practitioner of some sort and be like, hey, I don't know what's going on, but every time I lay down, my freaking shoulder, my neck, my knee, something, or it's just throbbing and doesn't feel good. That's a real good telltale sign of like, hey, you need to get some work done. You need to go put in the time to your body like you do your car. Most people, they're always taking their car in for a tune-up, oil change. Your body needs it too, right? Whether or not you've had a rough life or you've had, a lot of traumatic injuries, we still need to take our bodies in for an oil change. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good analogy. How we tend to focus on outward things, external things to help our days be easier, right? Taking our cars in or making sure that our kids are well dressed and fed and successful, but we never usually listen to our bodies ourselves. Well, Jason, thank you so much for today and all this information. I would love for people to find where they can find you, ask questions to you. Where can they find your information?
Yeah, so I keep it really simple. I have a website. It's, fortwaynerolfing.com. And then you can email me at jason@fortwaynerolfing.com. And you could even find my phone number probably on there and shoot me a text. I'm a very easygoing person. You shoot me a text and you have questions, I'm open, to respond and talk to you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. I know I've sent you some questions, and I think our entire session is me saying, tell me more about this, but what about this? And you're so gracious in answering my questions. I've learned so much.
Yeah.
So thanks so much for today. I really appreciate you being here.
Likewise, Paige. Thank you. I really appreciate it as well.
Yeah. All right. That's it. How do you feel that went? Do you feel like you got what you wanted out?
I think so.
Yeah.
I don't know if we hit all the topics in there.
Yeah.
I kind of had a moment due to my anxiety being a little high.
That's okay.
My body feels very raw from, having that today.
I think that was actually very valuable, and people saw the connection between their mind and body, and how that makes a connection piece. So yeah, I thought it was great. Thanks for being vulnerable.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you.
All right. Wasn't that an awesome conversation with Jason? I mean, the guy is just so knowledgeable. I just sit in just his wisdom. I mean, his voice in itself, when he talks about people, his clients on the table, for instance, as he's manipulating the bones in the spine and the cranial sacral thing. This is why I'm not a doctor, friends. I literally don't know the language at all. But I know as he's changing things up, his voice is so soothing, isn't it? But the wisdom, it's spot on. And so I'm sure that you took away many things today, but here's some of the things that I would love to reiterate that I learned from Jason in our conversation. I think the first one, let's listen to our bodies. Our bodies are telling us when things are wrong and they're off or they're not working correctly. I don't know about you, but oftentimes if I have a headache or my back aches, ibuprofen is my go-to. But what we fail to realize is that pain is giving us an indication that something is wrong, that maybe we need to look at our lifestyle. Maybe we need to drink more water. Maybe we need to sleep more. We need to stretch, practice just releasing tension and our anxiety. Our pain in our body is indicative that something is wrong. So the more that we can just sit still, and I know Jason talked about maybe it happens when you finally lay down at night. The kids are in bed, you're done with work, the TV is off, and you're just sitting in the peace of wanting to go to sleep, and your body's telling you something. That's a time. Listen to your body, because in that, you'll be able to go and get healing instead of just treating the symptoms with ibuprofen or going to the doctor and getting something that might actually have more detrimental impact than you ever anticipated. So that leads me to my next point about when you go to a doctor, keep in mind, they're phenomenal. I have so many amazing doctor friends. Let's just be clear on that. And I'm not a doctor. I know that they know what they're doing, but oftentimes in their training, they have a very narrow focus. So when I come in and I say that I have vertigo symptoms, for instance, I shared that story with y'all, that they thought maybe it's something neurological. And that became very concerning to me because that was their go-to. That's their specialty. That's their area of focus. But what I realized that it wasn't, praise the Lord, it wasn't neurological. In fact, it was something else altogether. So when you go to a doctor, make sure that you are checking out other potential options as well. So I'm not saying going on Google and WebMD, because let's be honest, that, can lead to straight death very quickly in terms of your symptomology. But do get a second opinion. Figure out, where do your friends go? Who do they see? That's how I even met Jason, is that I was talking to someone about some of the ailments that my body was experiencing, and they said, why don't you try this out? Word of mouth can be such a good thing for us when we're finding other ways to learn how to treat our bodies in a healthy way. So be mindful. Your doctors are the best. However, they also stay in their own lane oftentimes. I think another thing that was important that he mentioned, especially in his story, is when you do go to the doctor and the doctor doesn't necessarily understand or hear what you're saying, and how lonely that can be when you feel like that's not what my body is actually telling. That doesn't make sense, that that's the core issue. I remember I just went through something like that as well recently, where for years I was telling my doctor, this is not right. When I take this type of medication, it exemplifies this other symptomology that I'm trying to eliminate. And for years, they pushed back and said, well, that's not what the medication's supposed to do. I've never heard anyone struggle with that. And so it made me feel like I was the crazy one. Whereas 6 months ago, I went to a new doctor and I explained the situation, and they did some blood work, and they actually showed that what I was struggling with was what I was telling my previous doctor the whole time. So listen to your body. Know that doctors are amazing, but they don't always stay in their lane. Or doctors are amazing, but they don't always know everything that's going on with your body. And so get a second opinion. Third and last takeaway is everything about your body is tied together. So from what you eat, how much you sleep, what your stress level is, what is your physical movement throughout the day, all of that is connected in a mind, body, and soul. And so if one thing is off, it may be connected to something else with your daily rhythms. So take some time. Think about, what are you eating? How much are you sleeping? How are you reducing stress in your daytime? And again, we're so focused on those around us, making sure everyone around us has what they need. So this is your permission to take an assessment, take a step back and say, where can I adjust my rhythms so that I can be healthier, so I can be the best that I possibly could be for my family? Okay, friends, thanks so much again for joining me today on this episode of Embracing Your Season. And we would love to hear some of your thoughts. So you can reach me at paigeclingenpeel@gmail.com. All right, we have a lot of exciting interviews coming up, so we will see you next time on another episode of Embracing Your Season.